All right. So hi, everyone. After a brief derailment, thank you, Sills. The Comet project team is back on track at full speed ahead. So welcome everyone to Comet Sprint 5 review meeting. I'm going to hand this over to Tom so that he can tell us what was accomplished in this sprint.
Thanks. So I guess I want to start by saying that we did get quite a lot done this sprint, and I'm really pleased with how we've sort of picked this project back up after a break. I think we really hit the ground running, and I'm really happy about it. Okay, so I guess I'll start us off with the first thing that we did, which was before the break, we had set up access login with our Google authentication, and we left that in a state where users who logged in that way didn't have any substantial access to the system. So we added a base set of admin users, which are currently just the people who are working on the project. I think we'll have some discussions about how to make users admins and manage those credentials later on. But we did get these in so that now the various people on each campus who need access to each campus's deployment can do that. So I've logged in as myself, and I am here with administrative access, which you can see by all the various options that I have here in the sidebar. The main theme that we had in mind for this sprint was working on on object structure. So that's making sure that we can attach files to objects, making sure that we can nest objects, and then we discussed working on collections, which have some needed upstream work to support our database layer over on the community side, and that part I'm going to call out later as not quite done work, and maybe in scope for the next work cycle or even possibly the next sprint. But for now, I think what I'll demo is nesting objects. So I'm going to start us with a totally new work, and I'll go ahead and name it, let's make it like book, just to like suggest that maybe we have multiple pages in a book, let's say, and I'm going to put in one of the demo files, sample file.pdf, and I'll save that. So I've got a book with a file. There are a couple of things on this view, the thumbnail and the title, that are open tickets to sort of make those really sharp. I think we want to retain the file titles. The thing I want to call out here is that now from this book, we can add a component. The component terminology is something that we implemented just in the last day or so. That the default Hyrax way of handling this is to call this a child. So we'll call them components for our purposes. And I'll go ahead and put an image in. And actually, why don't I just put a couple just to show multiple file attachments. Oh, okay, we're uploading everything. Let's do that one and that one. And go ahead and save those. Or push the button. Okay, so now we've got a page which also has its own files. So one of the things that I'm trying to call out here is that we do have sort of a nested structure here. I'm going to go back to the book, and we can see that page 1 is in the book. The book can have files of its own, and we can do this deeper. Let's say that like this is, I don't know what's in a page. Let's like imagine that we have some alternate content or something. I probably should have picked something that was more amenable to multiple levels of depth, but you get the idea. And now we've got page 1 alt, which has its own files. And we can sort of go down the chain and see that we have this whole structure in place. I think we'll probably want to sort of have some conversations, Gabriella, about how best to display this structure. I think that this, like the objects showing up in this same view with the files is maybe not the easiest to navigate. And then also you will note that that if I'm from book, I can only see the next level down and not the whole deep structure. I have to sort of follow through to be able to see what this object looks like in whole. So there's probably some need for visualization at the top level that sort of gives you an idea of what all is in this overall object structure. But that's the big work that we got done. It's also possible to create a, oops, I'm logging out. I'm just clicking on random stuff now. It's also possible to create a file or a work, an object with no files attached. We're calling these stub or metadata first records. So I can do, let's call that stub, and it validates the metadata, and that should be okay. And we see that there's no files attached here. And I can go back and add files to this in edit. I guess I'm also sort of demoing the range of file attachments allowed. We've got various images and a zip file attached here. We're not doing much different with different kinds of files at this point. But it's certainly conceivable that we could do different things with them. Okay. I guess I want to hand it briefly over to Alex to talk about configurable metadata, which is a whole line of work that she got done during this sprint. Alex, I was noticing that this staging environment doesn't seem to have the metadata, the local metadata, and I wonder if you want to take over screen share in an environment that does, or if you just want to.
I don't know if I have an environment that does then if the staging site hasn't deployed correctly. It might just be missing the environment variable that configures which metadata model.
Yeah, that seems likely. Do you have a review or a dev environment that has this in place, or do you want to just?
Not currently, no.
Okay. Then I'll just let you talk about it a second.
Okay.
And we can defer on on a demo, we were going to switch over to the UCSD environment and show the different metadata configurations.
Sounds good. So what we had set up before last week was basically hard coding our metadata models into the code, and so we had kind of a sort of a skeleton of a UCSB model with a few additional fields, and in the code itself we would import it. So we actually just wrote out kind of include the scheme for the UCSB model, and obviously that is no good because since both UCSB and UCSD are deploying from the same code base, that means UCSD would end up with our metadata models as well. And the whole idea is that we are going to have different models. And that was the whole idea of the M3 project, that we have customizable metadata models that each institution can tweak to suit their needs. So what I did was instead of hard coding the model, I had it read from an environment variable. And so I kind of overrode some of the schema loading code to, instead of taking the argument hard coded, it just reads from the environment, and there's an environment where you can have a comma separated list of models, and it will just load all those dynamically. And so that way each institution can set that variable on deployment differently and get different metadata models in their instances.
Thanks. So yeah, so that should put us in a pretty good position to be doing some work on the subject matter expert side to get a more robust set of metadata fields in place here. You can see at this point, this just says title on at least some of the deploys for the UCSB side. We do have other fields getting injected here, and I think we'll probably get this staging and the UCSB prod updated with our sort of very minimal metadata schema set up, and then probably it will be Chrissy and Arwen working sort of separately on each campus to help us get metadata config that works for each campus. So I hope that we'll be moving that forward, if not in the remaining sprint in this sort of mini cycle, then in August when we come back to working on Comet, then I think the metadata model should really expand really quickly with this work out of the way. Last but not least, I do want to just call out that a lot of background DevOps type work got done in this sprint. And most importantly, I think folks did a bunch of work on getting automated code-driven browser tests in place. So both during development on our local environments and during CI, we're now able to write and run a suite of browser tests where sort of a browser engine clicks around the site and makes sure that things work as expected. That's a really important piece of infrastructure for us. We try to do a lot of automated testing, and having some at this high level with the browser is a really important part of that. Part of making sure that as we work, we're continuing to add features rather than breaking old ones. So that's the sort of overall set of accomplishments for this sprint. There are a couple of things that we either planned to or sort of hoped to as a stretch get done in this sprint that didn't quite make it. One of those is the file download. So we've shown you file attachments sort of across the board. But if I'm over here and I click this download the file button, I get sort of a stub at this point. And that just represents some not quite complete work for wiring in those downloads. That is fairly close, I think, and I'd hope that we'll have a fairly easy time closing it out from here. The other major one that is significant in this app is that or that I can show you in the app, is that we don't have support for collections. There's various behaviors that will kind of like not quite work in the collections, but I think the main thing is that you'll note that there's no real way to add any. And that represents some work that we're sort of trying to negotiate both upstream and also, like, I think we put it in sprint this time as a stretch and it didn't quite make it. We've put it into the next sprint also as sort of the like not primary goal, but a high priority secondary one. We do think that having collection support is a prerequisite to starting to ingest content into the production environment. We don't want to ingest data from existing systems or new collections without being able to capture the collection membership at ingest time. I think there is some community work going on this week in the form of a Samvera Developers Congress. And there's some interest, I think, from that group in working on collection support in the upstream for our backend. So I think it may move forward in that way, or we may just have it in our court for the next sprint. If it doesn't get done before this the end of this sort of mini work cycle, I think it will be a very high priority for the next one. And then the last thing that we did hope to get done that is sort of stuck at the moment is configuration for UCSD's production EasyID setup. We do have low-level support for EasyIDs, so there's no way in this UI or through our existing deposit processes to mint them. But the code to do that is there, so it's possible to do it manually or using sort of a one-off process for works, and putting the EasyID minting into the workflow process is upcoming work, but we were hoping to get the client configuration in place for both campuses. It's in for UCSB, but it's stuck on the UCSD side on some external blockers. I think they're waiting on the go-ahead or credentials. Sorry if I'm glossing over this poorly, Thor. So that's the last thing that we planned for this sprint that didn't quite make it. Okay, so what's next? We have one more sprint left in this sort of ad hoc work cycle. Again, this is us coming back to the project after putting a sort of emergency brake on for a SILS related interruption. And during this, so we'll have that one sprint, and then I guess we're off for just a couple of weeks, and then back on in August for a full work cycle that's been planned since the spring. And we are, during this next sprint, our big goal is to get workflows set up. So that will look like some kind of support for doing an initial deposit like you've seen so far, and then a review step, and some support for this workflow roles set up so that we can have certain users be allowed to move objects through certain parts of the workflow. Our goals for this next sprint are really limited to individual objects moving through workflow. So I want to call that out here, because I think people will be most interested in moving batches of objects through workflows. But we consider the individual object case to be sort of a prerequisite to the batch case. So we're going to show that, demo it, and then sort of the next iteration on workflows will be handling the more common, I think, batch cases. And that's our primary goal. We, again, did add collections work as possible work to get done this sprint. We're sort of hoping that the workflow stuff will be really productive work and leave us with a little bit of time on our hands to do some other stuff. So the collections is a high priority in that case, as well as setting up some AAAF infrastructure for serving images, which might start to look like getting viewers in this space, thumbnails in place here and here, and that kind of work. I think that's all I have. Gabriella, did I miss anything? Do you want to say anything to close this out?
I don't have anything to add, but I'll just, again, restate what you did earlier, that this was a big sprint. A lot of work was done, and go team, because this is a really good demo. I'm really happy with what I'm seeing here.
Yeah, I'll say again that I'm just really pleased with how quickly the team got back on this work after breakaway. It's easy to sort of downplay the invisible infrastructure work that happens, but a ton got done on that front in addition to this components and file upload work. So it's really compelling, and I'm really happy with the momentum. Thanks everyone for your efforts. Okay, do we want to quit the record? Are we all set?
I think so. Let me pause this.